Welcome to Paper 1 revision of Graham Greene's Brighton Rock. It's 1938 in the popular seaside resort of Brighton on a bank holiday. Hale, playing the part of Collie Kibber, works for the Daily Messenger newspaper, giving out cards for prizes to the holiday crowd, but he has something else on his mind. Hale knew, before he'd been in Brighton 3 hours, that they meant to murder him. With his inky fingers and his bitten nails, his manner cynical and nervous, anybody could tell he didn't belong to the early summer sun, the cool Whitsun wind off the sea, the holiday crowd. They came in by train from Victoria every 5 minutes, rocked down Queen's Road, standing on the tops of the little local trams, stepped off in bewildered multitudes into fresh and glittering air. The new silver paint sparkled on the piers. Cream houses ran away into the west like a pale Victorian watercolour. A race in miniature motors, a band playing, flower gardens in bloom below the front, an aeroplane advertising something for the health in pale vanishing clouds across the sky. It had seemed quite easy to Hale to be lost in Brighton. 50,000 people beside himself were down for the day, and for quite a while he gave himself up to the good day, drinking gins and tonics wherever his programme allowed. For he had to stick closely to the programme. From 10 till 11, Queen's Road and Castle Square. From 11 till 12, the Aquarium and Palace Pier. 12 till 1, the front between the Old Ship and West Pier. Back for lunch between 1 and 2 in any restaurant he chose round the Castle Square. And after that he had to make his way all down the parade to West Pier and then to the station by Hove Streets. Advertised on every messenger poster, Collie Kibber in Brighton today. In his pocket he had a packet of cards to distribute in hidden places along his route. Those who found them would receive 10 shillings from the messenger, but the big prize was reserved for whoever challenged Hale in the proper form of words with a copy of the messenger in his hand. "You are Mr. Collie Kibber. I claim the Daily Messenger prize." This was Hale's job, to keep doing his duty until a challenger released him in every seaside town in turn. Yesterday Southend, today Brighton, tomorrow. He drank his gin and tonic hastily as a clock struck 11 and moved out of Castle Square. Collie Kibber always played fair, always wore the same kind of hat as in the photograph the messenger printed, was always on time. Yesterday in Southend he'd been unchallenged. The paper liked to save its guineas occasionally, but not too often. It was his duty today to be spotted, and it was his inclination too. There were reasons why he didn't feel too safe in Brighton, even in the Whitsun crowd. He leant against the rail near the Palace Pier and showed his face to the crowd as it uncoiled endlessly past him like a twisted piece of wire. 2 by 2, each with an air of sober and determined gaiety. They'd stood all the way from Victoria in crowded carriages. They would have to wait in queues for lunch. At midnight, half asleep, they would rock back in trains an hour late to the cramped streets and the closed pubs and the weary walk home. With immense labour and immense patience, they extricated from a long day the grain of pleasure, this sun, this music, the rattle of the miniature cars, the ghost train diving between the grinning skeletons under the Aquarium promenade. The cars, the sticks of Brighton Rock, the paper sailors' caps. Nobody paid any attention to Hale. No one seemed to be carrying a messenger. He deposited one of his cards carefully in the top of the little basket and moved on, with his bitten nails and inky fingers, alone. Section A, Reading. Answer all questions in this section. You're advised to spend about 45 minutes on this section. Question 1. Read again the first part of the source, lines 1 to 3. List 4 things from this part of the source about Hale. 4 marks. Question 2. Look in detail at this extract from lines 4 to 11 of the source. How does the writer use language here to describe Brighton on that day? You could include the writer's choice of words and phrases, language features and techniques, sentence forms. 8 marks. Question 3. You now need to think about the whole of the source. This text is from the opening of a novel. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, any other structural features that interest you. 8 marks. Question 4. Focus this part of your answer on the second part of the source from line 16 to the end. A student having read this section of the text said, "This part of the text, explaining what Hale is doing, shows how nervous and unsafe he feels. It reminds me of the first line." To what extent do you agree? In your response, you could consider your own impressions of how Hale feels, evaluate how the writer creates an unsafe atmosphere, support your opinions with references to the text. 20 marks. Section B, writing. You're advised to spend about 45 minutes on this section. Write in full sentences. You're reminded of the need to plan your answer. You should leave enough time to check your work at the end. Question 5. Your school or college is asking students to contribute some creative writing for its website. Either write a description suggested by this picture, or describe an occasion when you felt unsure or challenged. Focus on the thoughts and feelings you had at the time. 24 marks for content and organisation, 16 marks for technical accuracy, 40 marks. Some information about preparing for questions 4 and 5 on the exam paper. Question 4 prep. At least 3 paragraphs, please. Look for vocabulary and quotations associated with feeling unsafe. How are the holidaymakers described? Are there any metaphors or similes for danger? How's he behaving? Once you've found quotations, state what the quotation shows. That's your point, or the what part of what, how and why. Include your quote in your answer. That's your example, or the how part. Decide on what part of grammar or technique is being used and name it. So that's your technique for the how part. And state why this quotation contributes or does not contribute to a dangerous atmosphere. Explain what it could represent other than what's literally written on the page. These are the implications. So that's your analysis. What do you understand? That's the why part. This is question 5 prep. Do 5 paragraphs if you can. For the description, make a vocabulary list of words you can use for describing the scene using all your 5 senses and your emotions. Try to use 3 different words for each feeling. The techniques are really important in description. For the story, plan your interesting setting, for example, the time and place. Your story doesn't have to be true, it has to be well written. Plan your narrative hook, for example, the use of pronouns such as it in the first sentence. Plan your ordering. Where will it start? Will there be a flashback? Will there be foreshadowing? What will be your journey through the paragraphs? Include techniques such as simile, metaphor, alliteration and personification.